What actually are the first recorded photographs that you know about of extraterrestrial visitors or UFOs?
A UFO, an unidentified flying object, was taken in 1917 on the 13th of October at Fatima, Portugal.
Fatima. I think the Catholic religion has a legend about the apparition that appeared at Fatima. Was there also a UFO at that time?
Yes. The legend coincides with the date and place. There was some previous sightings leading up to this, and word had gotten out that an apparition was taking place. Now, this was a beautiful woman, alleged to be the Virgin Mary, making an appearance in the air, standing on some bushes, and it was seen by some young children there. This was a spherical object, that a flattened spheroid, that rotated on a vertical axis and also circled over this large crowd of people in the fields. A densification of the object, the same photo taken by Mr. Fendria. It shows the object that passed over the people, and it radiated enough heat and light that it actually dried the clothes of the people standing in the mud. Now, at the same time, the apparition appeared to the children. That is the legend in the Catholic Church. The story of these people at this time, who had little experience with UFOs, was that the sun came through the clouds, and this was part of the miracle. However, Greenwich Observatory in London recorded the sun in the same place, the same time, right on schedule over Greenwich, at 12 o'clock, high noon, the time of the photograph.
What other sightings were there? I know during the war, there's been reports that fighter bombers had seen UFOs.
Yes, back in 1939, the Japanese first noticed them over in their observing their bomber formations over China. 39 and 40. They were reported by combatants from then on. The Americans thought that the Germans had a secret weapon. The Germans thought the Americans had a secret weapon. A strange craft. Here's a dark one pursuing some Sally bombers over China.
But what about some of those that perhaps newspaper people have taken?
Well, here's one that Mr. George Stock, a newspaper photographer from Passaic, New Jersey, took. He was cleaning his camera in the backyard of his house when he heard a hum, looked up, and saw a strange object approaching. He had a 4x5 press camera. He slipped the film cartridge into it, and he snapped 4 pictures of this object. It approached, passed over his house, and flew over the yard, and leaving the yard. By now he's excited and he's running after it. He's got the camera tilted in all angles and excitedly trying to get as many pictures as possible. 2 large cloud-shaped objects that are following a Japanese All Nippon Airways passenger transport, and the leading cloud-shaped object had launched a little dark sphere that flew towards the jetliner, then circled away and flew off in the distance. They didn't see it return to the mothership. But this is as one case of a larger craft seen to discharge an object, and the object is photographed in relationship with the mothership. Here in this photo, you see the little dark object in the middle of the picture, and the light
had reported to the Aerial Phenomenal Research Organization, which is a worldwide organization which handles reports from all over the world by people who have cited professionals, scientists, physicists.
Yes, we have representation in 50 different countries, and at the moment we aren't getting much from overseas because I guess there's so much activity in the States. It's sort of obscured what may be happening elsewhere for the time being. But the activity seems to be largely in the southeast, largely in the southeast, mostly all east of the Mississippi at the time. And I'll just give an idea of what is happening. In Mississippi also, we have a case involving the so-called angel's hair, where UFOs were seen at a sort of a high altitude, and filmy silvery substance came floating down to Earth. This has been reported in quite a few other cases, and we have quite a bit of it this time being kept under refrigeration. And I think we'll subject that to gas chromatography tests and mass spectrography and so on, and try to determine what it is.
There are 3 analyses that I know that have been made of this substance, and it seems to be a boron silicate, which very closely approximates spun glass in consistency. Surrounding the UFOs when they're under heavy power, it seems to originate with an increase of power, connection with it.
There's been a lot of reports, especially in the United States lately, of unidentified flying objects. What is this sudden increase of reports that you've had at the Aerial Phenomenal Research Organization?
Well, I think it's what we would call a flat condition. We've had quite an increase of reports, and they seem to be a substantial type report. In other words, we have reports of people having close encounters or near flyovers and this sort of thing. I think we all have heard about the Pascagoula, Mississippi case, where two men that were fishing reported that a UFO came down about 40 feet from them and then floated out and floated them aboard and examined them. Mm-hmm. It's really a wild-sounding story, but we sent one of our consulting staff, Dr. Harder, in there to interview those people, and he came away convinced that they were describing a real occurrence to the best of their ability.
What are some of the details about that particular incident?
The men, as I said, were fishing at an abandoned shipyard a little up the Pascagoula River from an operating shipyard where these men work. They were fishing not for sport, but for food. And it was late at night, about 11 o'clock. They said that this object came down near the ground, about 40 feet from them, and the older man, the younger of the two, fainted early in the incident, and he can't tell us too much about it. Mm-hmm. The older man said that he felt like jumping in the river to get away, but he couldn't. Then he said that some beings that looked roughly humanoid, he described them as having wrinkly, silvery skin, pointed ears, slits for eyes, slit for mouth, pointed nose, and hands. No hands, they were claws. They were two opposed digits that grasped like a pincher. And he said when those pinchers, when they floated over the room and those pinchers grabbed them, that they were weightless and they just floated aboard. Like I said, it sounds like science fiction. But then science fiction writers have told us that the activities of an advanced culture would seem like magic to us. Well, this certainly fills that bill. But under hypnosis, you see, these men were regressed. They became panicky all over again, the sort of thing that can't really be simulated. And I think one of the deputies there stated it quite well in folksy terms. He said, if it wasn't a real thing, then those guys ought to be in Hollywood. He says, they couldn't be that excited without something happening.
Is there any reason that you feel that we have to fear these UFOs and perhaps the beings that are occupying these space objects?
Well, the evidence seems to indicate that we don't have anything to fear. They've been here for a long time, probably as long as we've been here. They haven't done anything to us yet, as far as we know. Nobody's been harmed, and they haven't taken over the world or any country. I don't think there's anything to fear at this point. If they were going to do something, they could have done it long ago. I think that Mr. Daniken was more on the track when he's describing an order of intelligence that is concerned about our development, probably senior brothers of ours, spiritually and more highly evolved and with greater technologies that have gone through a phase of evolution that we are now in and are aware of the pitfalls of our evolving technology and are concerned about our development. Here's an example of two craft that approached a man, Mr. Augusto Aranda, over Yungay, Peru. That's on Mount Huascaran. If you remember the earthquake that we had, I believe it was about 2 years ago, where the mudslide came down the valley and completely wiped out this little town of Yungay and all of its residents. They approached him, passed overhead, separated and circled back. Here's another one of them circling, and circled around and passed out over the valley, and then rejoined and flew away.
Recently, on the California coast around Half Moon Bay, it was reported by a trained observer, a policeman, and several other people that there was a fireball shot supposedly from an unidentified flying object into the Half Moon Bay area. And it has been theorized by other scientists studying Earth, the crust being so thin in that particular area, that perhaps these unidentified flying objects and the beings manning them were firing a fireball into the water to perhaps warm the water and prevent a major earthquake in that area. Have you heard any of these theories projected, and what do you feel about that?
No, I hadn't heard that theory. I would like to report something that we received quite a few years back, preceding quite a disastrous earthquake in Caracas, Venezuela. Just preceding the time of that earthquake, UFOs were reported entering the ocean off the Venezuelan coast and leaving, disc-shaped UFOs. So there may be a concern among them about the stability of the Earth's crust. I wouldn't know. There does seem to be that indication. That would be one of their concerns. One of our consultants has brought up the idea that mankind is just on the verge of becoming a highly technical society, and that this is probably the most dangerous area in man's development. He thinks it's a threshold that's very difficult to cross, the likelihood being that an intelligent race reaching this stage of advancement might destroy itself, thinking specifically of the atomic bomb and things of that sort. He thinks that to a visiting species that has passed that stage, that this would be a very interesting stage in the development of a planet to watch, and they might be here observing for that reason.
Well, in our past recorded history about UFOs, it's been said that there's been times where these beings have contacted certain leaders of certain nations and have warned them about our particular development in technology and the negative use of nuclear weapons and this type of thing. Do you think that perhaps they're returning for any purposes like this with these recent sightings and landings?
Well, I think that these stories of contact are always open to question. They usually appear in scriptural material and very seldom have any historical backing that you're able to trace. I would rule out that possibility, but I would say that evidence up to this time indicates that they're here for their purposes and not for ours.
Trinidad Island, by the way, is a downrange monitoring station for the V-2 missiles that we fired from Cape Kennedy down off the coast of Africa in our studies of ballistic trajectories leading up to our space efforts. And there was quite a bit of activity, UFO activity, along this track, and they were observed to be following the missiles as they were shot downrange. This is one of the key monitoring stations being reopened, and this craft is observing the reopening of the station.
Also, there were reports several years ago in the 50s about flying saucers coming around white sands and white plains where they did the atomic testing. What do you feel about that?
Well, there were some interesting experiences there. They followed the high-altitude research rockets. They would fire a rocket from the ground, and of course they went out at a very high speed, like thousands of miles an hour, and small craft would be observed approaching horizontally, change course, and follow the rocket vertically a distance, and this was watched through theodolite cameras, and even photographs were taken. I don't have any of them.
Also, aren't there some photographs by NASA of unidentified flying objects, even when our own astronauts were out in space?
Well, we've seen some photographs that were allegedly taken by the astronauts, yes. NASA's only released a couple, though. And they were published in Life magazine, but they have more. So
they do seem to be sort of checking on our own technological development. And could this be the purpose of one of the purposes for their visitation to Earth?
And they seem to be concerned with our developing science, yes. They've been observed in close proximity to scientific endeavors. A UFO was photographed hovering over the Rocketdyne testing of the Saturn launch rockets when they were being designed, the ones that carried the moon teams to the moon. And that was one of our greatest technological undertakings. Those were fantastic rockets for us at the time. And there was a lot of activity around that.
I've noticed that there has been sort of a groundswell of interest over the years that's progressed very slowly. But I think that now we're confronted with a situation where the government credibility is a very low ebb. And people are discounting the previous government studies that have said there's really nothing to this. And also the situation on the Earth is such that I think people are glad to entertain the idea that this may not be the best there is. It's sort of a diversionary thing in these troubled times, I guess.
Here's one taken over in Missouri by an old gentleman. He's an old man. He had been trying to take a picture of a puppy and a kitten playing on the back patio of his house. And they scattered, and he looked up and he saw that object rising and pulling those spheres up behind it.
It looked like it has sort of a tripod underneath. Are those smaller ships, or is those some type of landing gear?
It was extended and being retracted, whatever it was, and the object accelerated as it rose. It rose ever faster until it left as a streak of light.
Now, are they actually there in physical form, or do they disappear? Are they speeding away in terms of velocity?
Well, whatever they were observing, their observation finished. They do blink out, though, and they do suddenly emerge. Here's a big island off the coast of Brazil back in 1958, 16th of January 1958. Special studies being made all around the world at that time. And a survey ship, an official Brazilian Navy survey ship, was taking a crew to Trinidad Island here. And they observed an object approaching from the sea, and it passed parallel to the ship's course and behind some rocks over the island itself here. And all of the people aboard the craft watched this object for a matter of a minute and a half or so as it passed. It flew behind the hill. Here you see an enlargement of it just before it passed behind the rock to the left. It was a flattened spheroid again. Average reporting would indicate that they range from about 15 feet diameter up to about 35 or 40 feet in diameter in one class. Then there's another group that starts at about 90 feet in diameter to 110. And then there's another class larger than that. It ranges from 200 to 300 feet in diameter. And that's a mighty big craft in the sky.
Science today really has been bridging time by speed, and for the past 100 years, we've really been able to move from the Wright brothers airplanes to 747s and jets, and even to our own lunar modules that go to the moon. I guess you might say around the world in 80 days to around the world in 90 minutes.
That's about the size of it.
But we've learned to move through time so rapidly that it seems really possible that if we have developed our knowledge so that we can move through time at these speeds, like Ezekiel landing his spaceship in biblical times, that it must be feasible that other intelligence could have possibly developed this.
Well, it's not only feasible for others to develop it, but we already, in published papers by respectable scientists, have shown that it's feasible for us to plan trips to nearby stars and expect the round-trip time to be shorter than the average person's lifespan, and without violating any of the laws of physics. And a lot of people are shocked by that. And if you figure we can do that with 100 years of technology behind us, then surely somebody else who's been around a little longer, we've got a cosmic time scale to expand. 5 billion years for the solar system, give or take a little, maybe 10 or 15 billion years for the galaxy, and who knows how much for the universe. So if they got started on their technological kick of changing how they do things and using new technology a little bit before we did, they may have been traipsing around between the places for millions of years.
What is really the difference between Earth time and the cosmic time scale?
Well, part of it is our own limited sense of vision. A year seems like a long time. And part of it is that we casually sort of forget something that Einstein showed us, that, crazy as it sounds, if you go close to the speed of light, which is only 670 million miles an hour, that's a nice clip. If you go close to the speed of light, time slows down. And it slows down a lot the closer you get to the speed of light. For example, if you wanted to go to a star that was, say, 40 light years away, which is just down the street, it's in our neighborhood, you might say, on a galactic scale. If you were going 99% of the speed of light, and it would only take a year at 1g acceleration, which we can stand because we're always exposed to it, to get to that speed. At that speed, it would only take you about 9 or 10 months to go 40 light years. If you go a little faster, say 99.9% of the speed of light, and we have made particles in the laboratory that go faster than that, and nature has too, then you could do it in under a month, pilot time. So the whole universe is within reach if you can go close to the speed of light. And becoming an astronaut then becomes a recipient of the gift of immortality. Because you go out and you don't age much, and you come back and everybody's a lot older.
Well, this seems to be involved with using energy in perhaps
That's
a way
the key.
that we haven't utilized it before.
Well, we seem bent on using energy for not very peaceful purposes. The big discoveries have all been turned into ways to kill people, but the same techniques that are used in A-bombs and H-bombs, fission and fusion systems, can be used to develop propulsion systems. I've worked on fission and fusion propulsion systems, and with our limited knowledge today, this is what makes these trips to nearby stars feasible.
Well, could it be that our space brothers are watching us today and perhaps have been observing us since ancient times?
It seems clear that we could have been marked on somebody's maps, stellar maps, a million years ago, nice place to visit, wouldn't want to live there kind of thing. And they could be keeping tabs on us, or they could be coming here to vacation. They could be coming here for as many different reasons as people visit, from Los Angeles to New York. Fun reasons, business reasons, people reasons, philosophical reasons. And yes, certainly some of them would be keeping their eye on Earthlings for an obvious reason. Anybody coming here now would certainly recognize a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare, whether we like it or not. That's the way it boils down to. And so with that notion, anybody would want to know when we're going into outer space, because if we take our own brands of sociology and friendship, namely hostility, shoot first, ask questions later, is an Earthling viewpoint, apparently, I think they'd want to know about it. Post the policeman, make sure those guys either stay down there or learn how to be adult Earthlings instead of the primitive society they are.
Well, Stanton, you really do believe that UFOs exist?
I'm convinced, after 14 years of study and investigation, that the evidence is simply overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles, some flying saucers or somebody else's spaceship.
Well, where is this data? Why haven't we seen this investigated before?
It's kind of funny. There's an enormous amount of information. There are 5 large-scale scientific studies that I discuss in my lectures that provide us, every one of them, and most of them government-sponsored, incidentally, provide us with a mass of information that would convince anybody who took the trouble to study it that some of these things are indeed real. But there are really several reasons, I think, at least in my traveling and talking to lots of people. The first problem is that they won't take the trouble to study it. The skeptics invariably are ignorant of the data. You'll hear all kinds of foolish statements about why aren't they seen on radar? They are. Why haven't they been seen by astronauts? They have been. None of those objections stand up when you look at the data. There's another problem, though, and that's the laughter curtain, the fear of ridicule. It's amazing how powerful that fear of ridicule is in terms of people's lives. Most sightings don't get reported. I check everywhere I speak, and I find 4 to 10% of the people have seen a UFO. I say, how many of you reported what you saw? If I'm lucky, 1/10, 1/20 of those have reported what they have seen. The third problem has to do really with ego, man's feeling of importance. If they were coming here, they'd want to talk to us, say the members of the National Academy of Sciences. News editors from newspapers and television stations say they'd come here, they would obviously have a press conference. They haven't called one, The fourth reason is up my alley. As a nuclear physicist working on crazy far-out propulsion systems for most of my professional life, it's a complete unwillingness to use our knowledge of technology to try to understand UFOs, figure out how they work. People wonder why bother with UFOs. The technological end is certainly one. Right now, we certainly worry about the traffic situation, the pollution problem, the energy crisis. What would it mean to mankind, to all of us Earthlings, if we had a system that could duplicate UFO behavior, up, over, and down, without noise, without pollution, without carrying along something you throw away, without burning up vital resources? You'd think that with our spending a few $1 billion on advanced propulsion systems like the space shuttle and VTOLs and all these other things, that the money might very well be better spent trying to figure out how these characters fly their machines and what's going on there. Because that's one practical benefit. You could grow things, you can dig things out of the ground in a place without having to build roads or railroads. The problems on the world are really a kind of distribution problems. We do have one planet. There's another practical end, kind of a dollar-saving end. As a taxpayer, this concerns me. We are committed to searching for life in outer space. There was one study done. They want to spend $6 to $10 billion to build a big radio telescope, listen for signals because somebody's undoubtedly sending and all that sort of thing. And I think for under $1 million, we could find out about intelligent creatures coming here rather than the television commercials from another star system. Perhaps the biggest reason, though, the biggest practical benefit for mankind in a pragmatic world would be for us to learn to recognize that we all do have something in common. From an alien's viewpoint, it's one dinky planet. We are all Earthlings. You ask somebody now, who are you? I'm an American, I'm Russian, I'm Chinese, black, white, male, female, all these other divisive sort of things. What we really ought to be saying is, I'm an Earthling. And from their viewpoint, it must seem very strange that we don't act as if we were all on the same planet, as if we were separated rather than part of a small picture on an unimportant place out in the boondocks. And so I think that's the biggest possible benefit, to avoid war in the future, to solve mankind's problems, so that we don't have the foolish business of paying some people not to produce food when not very far away on a cosmic scale there are people starving. I think we need to start to think of ourselves as Earthlings.